Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching the Adopac Talk Show. For those of you following global events, you'll agree that the past 2 weeks has brought some of the most consequential developments of the year. I'm referring to what US President Donald Trump has called the 12-day war, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran that began on June 13, 2025. If, like me, you've been wondering about the build-up to this war, the following clip may help clarify things and answer some of your questions. I came across a compelling conversation between Nima, host of Dialogue Works podcast, and former British diplomat Alastair Crooke. In their discussion, Crooke provides a clear and insightful breakdown of the events and strategic moves that led to Israel's attack on Iran. One thing that puzzled me was why, during the first few hours of the war, there were explosions in Iran, but no visible missiles launched from outside its borders. Alastair Crooke offers a detailed explanation that shed light on exactly what happened. This is an interesting conversation, so let's watch.
Well, first of all, the decision to go to war with Iran was made much earlier by Israel. Probably, they say, and this is the Israelis who say, probably about September, October. So they were preparing for months for the June the 13th attack, many months, because they were inserting cell sabotage groups into Iran through these very extended borders, across and preparing them together with dismantled drones, which were then put together. So what was the purpose? Well, first of all, it was a deception attempt. Deception attempt in the sense that the White House played along with Israel in deceiving the Iranians, thinking that there was going to be negotiations would continue with Witkoff and his team on the Sunday, and Friday was the day of the Israeli attack. And so the aim was to take Iran completely by surprise. So I think you can conclude much of what we saw with the idea that there was a sort of talk between Trump and Netanyahu, and the promises that, that there would be no military action by Israel during the talks, was all a part of a deceit. Was all a ruse to create surprise. And then what happened, because as you probably
Yeah, so I just wanted to interject here to say that Alastair Crooke is not the only commentator who believes that the United States kind of used this negotiation to lure Iran to a false sense of peace, right? Because again, the assumption would be that if you and someone are having a negotiation, it would be impossible for that person or their proxy to attack. Because again, let's not forget that and the United States and Iran had to resume negotiations on the Sunday, which was June the 15th. And while you could argue that Iran would have probably been focused on the negotiations and would have let their guard down. Again, that seems to be an argument that makes sense, that the United States was aware that the attack was going to happen. Remember, Donald Trump had given 60 days, and on the 61st day, Israel began its attack on Iran. I felt it was kind of important to kind of reiterate that Alastair Crooke here is not the only one who believes that Trump and Israel had used this negotiation to cause Iran to kind of let their guard down. I just thought that was important to highlight. Let's listen.
Felt at the time, a few days earlier, some days earlier. I mean, what happened? We were suddenly at war. It took everyone, everyone was thinking, what's going on? We're suddenly, it seems America and Israel are about, and Iran are going to go to war. And we had no great sense of this, beforehand. And it took people, I think, a bit by surprise. But that again was part of the deceit, because what we'd seen in the IAEA, that is the international agency that supervises the nuclear file, which under Grossi, who's the Director General, what we saw was a sudden last-minute build-up, which took place first on the 6th of June, but ultimately on the 12th of June. And what was it? It was largely generated or triggered by the AI, the artificial intelligence system that is used by IAEA. And the system is quite interesting. It's called Mosaic, but it belongs to Palantir. You might have heard of Palantir. It is originally conceived in order for counter-terrorist insurgency fighting. So what it does is it doesn't actually, look at facts on the ground. It actually projects and infers and imputes motive to people on the basis of what? Things like what social platform they go on, how they dress, who their circle of friends are, what is the pattern of their telephone calls, and so on. And that's how it works. I remember in Iraq, I was astonished at one point when the Americans were targeting people using this. They used it in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's used, of course, in Gaza. That is another, I don't know if it's exactly that program, but another program from Palantir that works quite closely with 8200 organization in Israel, was the one that was sort of selecting Palestinians for assassination based on, whether their son's WhatsApp group was playing football with Hamas members or whatever. So this suddenly came up, and it suggested a huge acceleration in the Iranian program, imputed, inferred from 400 million data points of all sorts, as I say, of those. And that seemed to suggest that there was a sudden acceleration. And then on the 12th, the day before, the IEA, if you like, agreed a resolution condemning Iran and saying it was in breach of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal dating back to 2015. So this was the pretext for the next day. The pretext was given to Israel by the IEA with the compliance of the board, including particularly the European three, who had already promised at that point to try and raise a resolution for snapback sanctions against Iran. And the other part of this thing, of course, is that this artificial intelligence targeting mechanism was actually being informed to the Israelis. The Iranians have got direct intelligence that much of the data was being passed by Grossi to Israeli Mossad officials. And therefore, the thing was being managed, if you like. This whole thing was being managed, and the pretext given for, if you like, this attack. Now,
again, something that Alastair Crooke is bringing up is the role that the International Atomic Energy Agency played in the build-up of this war. I mean, I think the argument he is making is that, again, data which the AEA got from Iran's nuclear facilities were passed on to Israel by Grossi, so who was head of the IAEA. So would you conclude that Grossi has been spying on Iran for Israel? I mean, that is an interesting way to look at it, right? Because again, the war, again, he would definitely bring this up, but again, the war, the desire or the reason that Israel used to justify its attack on Iran was based on the report, the most recent report by the Atomic Agency, condemning Iran and accusing Iran of speeding up and making moves in their uh, in their um, um, in their development of enriching of so again, let's listen.
Did Trump know this? Did the American team know this? I have no evidence, but it seems very likely that since this was going on for months and being coordinated with the United States, and of course all that talk about he was stopping Netanyahu. He spoke toughly. There was an argument with Netanyahu. It turns out it was nonsense, because it was all, this whole thing, the pretext was conceived in the IEA, the pretext was handed to Israel, and then Israel did its attack. And I think, if you like, to a certain extent, I don't know whether Trump directly or his team was somewhat suckered in by this presentation of AI to suggest that there was a sudden, immediate, and Iran was very close, therefore, to the possibility of making a weapon. Now, what was interesting was, that when I say pulled in or suckered, I'm saying that, what we saw was that he stuck completely with that line that, no, they're very quick. I mean, they're speeding towards a bomb. And he dismissed Tulsi Gabbard and her, if you like, compilation from the main intelligence services said there's no evidence of this, and it's agreed with the Europeans and all of the other sort of Five Eyes states. We have no evidence of moving it, no evidence of a change in the Supreme Leader's fatwa about a nuclear weapon, and that was dismissed. But the difference between the two is Tulsi Gabbard's was based on evidence. It was evidence-based. I mean, solid intelligence, which had to be checked and had to be made sure it was accurate and not false, against an AI system, Mosaic, which was saying something very different. Now, was that discrepancy addressed? It seems not, because Gabbard was actually excluded from all of the discussions about Iran when it came up to it. Then what happened on the time, and this is really important because, again, it's now very clear that this was a pattern, and the pattern we're seeing, I think we're going to see more of this, but this was a pattern. The decapitation of the senior military line commanders of the military, who were meeting in a sort of a room to plan an exercise, which was advertised, in which Israel would have known about it, a naval exercise, I think it was. So most of the leaders were there, and they were taken out in the room. I can't remember exactly how many it was now, but I think it's about 12 now been either killed in that room or subsequently. And then there was the assassinations, parallel assassinations of Iranian scientists who were killed in their home with their families, targeted for being involved in the nuclear program in some way. Then the other parts to this complex was a complex operation. All in one day was, first of all, disabling the air defenses in the central and the western part of Iran, the neighbor of Syria and Iraq. I always get my left and right in the wrong way around. But in the area close to Syria and Iraq, which was where they were.
Khuzestan. It's called Khuzestan.
Yeah, Khuzestan. There. And they disabled this and they used electronic warfare. It looks as if it was some form of cyber attack. And it took out the system. It was restored after about 8 hours, but during that period, it was disabled. But the intent of all of this and the background, which needs to be understood, was the idea was that the shock, the sudden shock of the decapitation, the assassination, the evidence that Israel could just kill A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on in single strikes to their home and so on, coupled with the loss of the air defense system, which was taken down. All of this would provoke the collapse of the state, of the entire state, would paralyze it, it would demoralize it, people wouldn't know what to do, there would be mayhem, and the state would collapse. And the model for this was Hezbollah, the decapitation strike on Hezbollah, and also the sense very much the American neocons have been very much taken by what happened in Syria, in the way in which with Syria, at one moment when Assad left Syria, really Syria imploded. I mean, it just fell apart. I know Syria a bit, and it was a shock to me how quickly it was. But they were full of this and believed that Iran would just collapse like a house of cards on the first day. And that then, there would be a color revolution, and that's why they infiltrated the groups to do, the standard thing, car bombs, disruption of civil life, blowing up the press and information services, and so the state couldn't recuperate, to create a sense of chaos amongst the Iranian people. They thought, which lead, and that's why they kept talking about, capitulation, talked about, I'm waiting for surrender, complete surrender because they thought they believed, and Trump believed, and I think Israel believed that this would bring about complete surrender of the state of Iran. And then what happened was just the opposite. Iran rebounded.
So yeah, in my opinion, this was clearly a misreading of the situation by Israel. I mean, treating Iran as though they were a militia like Hezbollah or Hamas of Gaza, where decapitating some of their leaders would throw the organizations in chaos. No, Iran is a state with a long history, with structure and hierarchy, and that's why they have multiple generals, they have multiple commanders, they have assistant, first deputy, second. Isn't that why you have orders? So that there could be a continuity if some few people were taken out. I mean, how many scientists do you think, nuclear scientists or physicists do you think Iran has? Probably multiple, probably thousands of them. Iran is a nation of about 92 million, and do you think they only had 5, 6, 7, 12 scientists? So yeah, so I think, I believe this the hope of Iran collapsing after the first couple of hours, after taking out a few generals or captains or commanders and killing a few scientists. I think for me that was a clear misread of the situation. I don't know if Israeli intelligence strong believed that taking out a few people will lead to a collapse of the state of Iran. I mean, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, was still there. I mean, if you took out the supreme leader, well, I might say, okay, yeah, there's possibility that there might be chaos and there might be confusion, and before a decision is reached as to who takes over and who has control of power, yeah, there would definitely be an opportunity for a possibility of a collapse. But no, this was clearly not the case. Like Mark Alistair is about to say, it was a complete misreading of the Iranian state, taking out a few commanders, generals, scientists. Yeah, there was no way going to lead to a collapse of the state of Iran. I think that too is an important point to reiterate. I would, let Mark Alistair, let Alistair continue. Alistair Crooke.
Found it very quickly. It restored the air defense system within 8 hours, got it back, restored the whole system that had been damaged by this process. And then it rebounded. New people were appointed to the military, and it moved smoothly towards the next stage, which was confronting Israel militarily. And of course, I mean, there were occasions with, the drones were being fired from within, mostly within Iran. Some of them being fired from up in the Caspian direction, from Azerbaijan, where the Israelis have a base. And these were different drones. These were drones with which were attack drones, which were capable of direct, if you like, bombing of infrastructure. So most of what we saw, in fact, was not after the first 8 hours, or at least, but even before. We weren't seeing Israeli, there was no footage of Israeli aircraft over Iran at this time. What we do see is parts of sort of rocket stages and of Israeli rockets like the Sparrow rocket lying in Iraq and Syria. And it looks as if the Israelis mostly did standoff attacks, launched attacks, standoff attacks in that way against Iran. And then they were using, first of all, the drones that were being assembled by the infiltrated terror cells. Some of it was just car bombings and simple attacks, but some of that was attacks on the air defense system. And as I say, the other element. And so what we see of videos, mostly are videos from these quite heavy, big drones. Iran has shot down 3 of them at various times that were over. And we don't really have any sort of evidence. The Israel and America talks blithely that, there's no air defenses. Iran is just open, it is defenseless and we can go. Just not true. It's just another one of the deceptions that we have of these many deceptions that have taken place to hoodwink the American and European public and the Israeli public too. So that was the background to the actual, as far as, one can piece it together. I can't vouch for all of it because I wasn't there, but that seems to me to be a rough scenario of what happened up until then the second day when everything kicked into the war mode, into the missiles started flying and we were into a war mode.
So yes, this is, a very detailed explanation on the build-up until June the 13th, and maybe a few hours into into the beginning of the the attack, right? So it tells us a little, kind of clearly how, this wasn't a plan that was put in place hurriedly by Israel. It is something that they've been working on for several months. Finding ways to infiltrate into Iran, using cells and even training the infiltrators on how to build these drones and how to launch them. I remember a couple of weeks ago, Iran, Ukraine, we had a similar situation in Russia where we had attacks on Russia's nuclear bombers, and again, these were not missiles that were shot, or drones that were shot, released from Ukraine. They were assembled in Russia, inside Russia, and then operated from within, right? So I think there's clearly a connection. It's again the same strategy. So there's definitely a worry. If I were in Russia, I would definitely be wanting to make the link between the attack that happened in Russia, coordinated by Ukraine, and again we see similar situation here in Iran. So I think my question is that someone had to have come up with this idea, right? And what did they do? Did they sell the same idea to Ukraine and then to Israel? Is this Israel's idea, strategy that was passed on to Ukraine by the United States or by their European allies? So I think there's clearly a connection between that. I don't think it's coincidence that the attack from within Iran is quite similar to what we saw in Russia a couple of weeks ago. So there's clearly a connection there, and I think Russian intelligence, of course, and Iranian intelligence will have to find a way to see if there's a connection there, and where the source is. Is it a Mossad idea that was passed on to Ukraine to support their war efforts against Russia? So yes, I hope this was informative and this cleared a few things for you. Again, for me, it did clear a lot, because I kind of wondered, how the build up until June 13th, but this gives me a really clear picture of what had happened in the initial stages of the attack, and why we had videos of explosions and bombings in Iran, and with no fighter jets or missiles coming out from without. So yes, I wanted to kind of put this out there. I thought it was an interesting conversation. Again, Alastair Crooke is a former British diplomat, and of course, well versed with things like that, probably more than myself, and probably more than some of you watching. So yes, I'll leave you with that. Thank you for watching the Adupak Talk Show. Of course, if this was interesting to you, please like, share this video, and thank you again for watching.